Welcome to the Scotty P podcast, man. I'm here with a good friend of mine, Mike Thacker. Man, I first met you a while back at a or it was a breathwork / movement and ice bath workshop down in like South Houston, I believe. And ever since then, man, we've become closer friends. I got invited to a men's group, and I've really got to know you through that. And yeah, man, if you want to go ahead and take a minute to let the audience know who you are.
Absolutely. My name is Mike Thacker. I spend my spare time doing things to help humans thrive, to overcome their limitations, to realize their limiting beliefs are and what the default programs are, and do those serve them or do those not serve them. There's a lot of modalities I use to help people move through these things. Obviously, like you said, the movement, the breath, the ice, those are the most popular. Those are the ones everybody likes to do. There's also a lot of value in the fasting and the silence. I realized as I was grabbing a shirt for this one had matriculated to the top of the stack. And it's like, okay, I'm going to be talking to a friend of mine. Do I want a shirt that says cultivate silence? It's like, I don't know, maybe there's a purpose for that. And the last thing is just nature, just being out where you can actually put your feet on the ground, breathe some fresh air, have some trees around you. So I'm glad we could find a spot that kind of embodies that.
Yeah.
And my day job is I lead technology consulting projects. And so there's that whole value in making sure things really work. And it's not just some woo-woo thing where, okay, people are wearing beads and feathers and burning incense, but it's like, is there real value? Like, are people's lives improving? Is their health getting better? Their finances getting better? Their relationships higher quality? Or is this just things they're doing that you're not really seeing a lot of outward impact? And that's always been one of my focuses for everything I do is what is the outward impact? What is the benefit that the individual is realizing as a result of these practices?
Man, it's intense. I always wondered what you did. I know we've had some interesting conversations about like AI and tech, so that's very interesting. And yeah, so man, silence is a good one. We talked, you brought up about the movement, the breath work, and the ice bath. And a lot of that is about being present. And I also really like what you said. You help people become aware of their default modalities. That's really intense because I also do a podcast with Tori and we call it Subconscious Elements.
Yes.
And yeah.
Which is a great podcast, by the way. I love what you and Tori are doing.
Thank you. Thank you. It's mostly a way for her to shine, you know, because I feel like I know stuff. And then when I hear her talk about it, I'm like, where are you learning this stuff from? Like, how do you know so much about it? But yeah, just that thing of, most of our lives are ran from the subconscious.
Right.
And man, I was thinking about this thought came to my mind on my way over here was, because one, I'm having a kid. And so I'm like starting to think about like how to teach, life lessons.
Right.
And one of them was like, or one of the things that occurred to me is like how apparent it is that like a lot of times you won't learn something until you need to learn it. Like, maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm the husky that burns himself.
I think everybody's like that. Yeah.
Right. And it's, it's only like when you come to like that crossroads where you have to make that choice. Otherwise, a lot of times we'll just continue to just like blindly let that pattern rule us.
Yes.
And so, yeah, man. So tell me about like your experience with the breath work, because that's honestly like really what caught my attention. Like the ice baths, I do appreciate. They're not but it's not the most fun for me.
Right.
But the breath work is like, I find like it's a really good way to tune into something that you didn't know was there, right? Like we definitely take breathing for granted.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, it's like you can really accomplish some superpowers when you learn how to breathe correctly. Like just by breathing correctly, you can hold your breath longer than you thought possible. So I'd really like to hear more about like kind of how you got into it and your overall knowledge of it.
Right. So like you, I've been started off in martial arts as a kid. I was never at your level. So I'm just going to throw that out there. Never trained to the intensity you did and focus that you've had. But as a result of that made me realize that, and just doing ROTC and athletics in school and just running made me realize okay, my breath is not optimal because I'm getting tired and 3 minutes seems like forever. And so those things made me realize, okay, I got to learn a little bit more about breath. And then as I got deeper into yoga, I started understanding all these pranayama practices. And it really wasn't until I discovered Wim Hof that then I had some switch flip that made me realize, oh, this thing is a lot more powerful than just not getting winded when you're doing physical activity. This has the ability to shift your entire mindset, to change your emotional state, to allow you to release trauma that's been trapped within your body, etc. And training with Wim was kind of the gateway to that. And then found another guy named Stig Stevenson, who was an Olympic or an Olympic swimmer, and then a free diver, and then he went back to medical school. And then during COVID, set a world record for the longest underwater swim.
Jesus.
And so, yeah, he was almost 50 when he did that. And most of those records of like those endurance underwater records are like guys in their 20s or early 30s are setting those, not guys bordering on 50. Anyway, long way of saying I studied with a lot of people and talked to a lot of individuals about breath, about their journey with the breath, and then just my own experiences. And every day I'm learning something new. I'm experiencing something. Like just last Friday, I was doing some breath work and I had this experience where I knew it wasn't real. I knew it was some type of hallucination because I was pretty certain I was laying in my bed doing breath work, but it seemed very real. And I'm having interactions with other humans and I'm touching people. It's like, there's no way this is real. I am absolutely certain I'm in my bed right now. And just a few days ago, I've been playing around with some binaural beats and doing the breath work. And I've gotten to a point where I can almost consistently, because before that it was kind of sporadic, where sometimes I'd have these transcendental experiences during breath work that would border on some of my experiences I've had with psychedelics. And now almost all the time, if I have some hemisync binaural beats in the background, the tactile experience of having the headphones on, it does something to detract the experience from me. And I know all the pure hemisync guys are like, you got to have the earphones on. If you don't have the earphones, you don't get the full experience. I've realized if I just have the device within a foot or 2 feet of my head, just playing, and it's not plugged into my ears, I can still have those same states. And I don't necessarily need to have anything in my ears because, again, it seems like the more things that are touching me when I'm trying to go deep, the more that's an impediment to really getting into those states.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
And so back to your very simple question and my long rambling answer. The three benefits, because I always like to put things in three, because that's the way a lot of people's minds work. The first is the healing, is we have so many things that get stuck, emotions, energy, etc. And taking these deep, powerful breaths is a great way to cleanse those out. So even if you're not doing a Wim Hof style breathing, doing Kapalabhati, doing Bastrika, any type of powerful breath is going to move a lot of energy and clear that stuff out. The second thing is just getting all that extra oxygen into your system, because so many people are walking around breathing so poorly and shallow. Just getting that extra oxygen, just their mind functions better, their body functions better when they're hyperoxygenated. And then the last piece of that is that breath hold component, where you do these things to hyperoxygenate yourself and then you stop and pause. And then there's that silent stillness that comes whenever your breath stops and your body is just quiet. And I think those three things are the most powerful benefits that most people can derive from breath work.
Yeah. A couple things. One of the things that I notice is if you're angry, almost always you're shallow breathing.
Right.
Almost always. And you don't even notice it. And, I'm sure most people have heard it's like, when you get angry, you're supposed to like count to 10, take deep breaths, but no one does that, right? Most people don't do that. But it's crazy that if you do it, it actually changes the mind state that you're in.
Absolutely.
And, I've been there in personal experiences, and I've also witnessed it in other people. It's like, yeah, when you're in that state where it's like, maybe you're not even angry, but you're like really agitated and your mind's like racing about all the things that you're annoyed about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're shallow breathing through your nose,
Right.
you're just, and, just something as simple as taking the time to take some deep breaths, like really does change that state that you're in.
And just because you're a beast, you go into anger, and I don't know if you're familiar with the Hawking scale of consciousness.
I think I am.
Yeah. It's like, so anger is much higher than
Right.
fear, shame, or guilt. And I would say, again, because you're not the guy to become afraid, or I don't think guilt and shame are part of your vocabulary. So anger is probably the lowest emotion you can access, but a lot of people are much lower than that. And like, yeah, breathing shallow through your nose. A lot of people, they're breathing shallow through their mouth. And especially, I don't want to be too controversial on my friend's podcast, but during the COVID years, there was a lot of focused attention to move people into a state of fear, and it was working for a lot of people. And you could see as they were moving around, you could see by the alignment of their body, you could see the way they were breathing. And then the breathing, especially the breathing in the masks, just reinforced that fear state and made it hard for them to move to a higher level where they could see beyond that and feel beyond that. And if you're walking around in those lower emotional states and you're breathing in a way that's going to keep you stuck in those lower emotional states, that's going to start affecting everything from the way you think, the way you feel, the way your body functions, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember having to work with that mask on, man, and it was like, I really missed not having one on. I just remember thinking like how grateful I was or how ungrateful I was to just be able to not have that thing on. And it's like, man, I can't wait to take this off and just take a fresh breath of air.
Right. Right.
And then now I don't even think about it again.
Right, exactly. And that's something a lot of people don't know is like everybody thinks of like respiration as just a way to get air in and out, but also it's the most efficient way to eliminate toxins from your body. Like you have more toxins being eliminated from your body than any of your other mechanisms, than urination, defecation, sweat, anything else. But if you have that mask right there, all those waste products that you're off-gassing constantly are not getting away from your body. They're just staying right there, and then you're sucking them right back in with the next breath. Yeah. And so that's another important reason to be taking deep, slow, powerful breaths to allow your body to cleanse itself versus you're doing these rapid, shallow breaths, not moving a lot of things out of your body that are not necessarily serving you.
Right. And another thing on the breath work, one of the best jiu-jitsu masters, he's arguably the best ever. His name was Hickson Gracie, one of the Gracies. Yeah. And he's known, like he was in the Hulk movie doing the breath work, the one that you do where he moves the stomach all fancy. Yeah. But he was he was the first, and he was most known for like incorporating a special type of yoga. It was like a movement yoga where he did like specific stretches that related to animals. I don't know if you know which one it is, but then he would do breath work. And his whole thing on it is that he did his matches in accordance to heart rate. Like he didn't really have like technical strategies of like, oh, I'm going to funnel him into this type of style or these techniques. He thought about his heart rate. He was like, I started every match with the lowest heart rate possible. He's like, I would do breath work and make sure that my heart rate was super low. And he said he would know going into the match that naturally their heart rate would be higher than his. Right. And then he would just push the match however they wanted to take it, and he would just push it to where they would be redlining and he still wouldn't be. He's like, he would say that, you know, if I could get their heart rate to 160, 170, mine would still be 140, 150. Right. And almost always they'll make the mistake. He's like, or he didn't say almost always, he's like, they will undoubtedly make a mistake, and that's when I would capitalize. And so that was his entire strategy, was about heart rate, and the key to the heart rate was through breath work. And it's funny because now in this new age, there's a new coach. He hails from Germany, and he's like recently gotten popular. Like out of nowhere, he's like the guy that everybody wants to hear from. And his whole thing is now heart rate training. And so like there's like new rash guards, new shirts out. It's like, you know, high heart rate, low heart rate, like you know, mastering like this idea that you learn you should be learning specific things based on your heart rate. Like if you have a high heart rate, you should be learning, you should be working on the things you're already good at. If you have a low heart rate, you want to do new techniques, things that you're not so good at. If you have a medium heart rate, you do the things that you kind of have a grasp on. And so he bases each day based on he's like, oh, I have a high heart rate day, a medium heart rate, a low heart rate. And it just cracks me up because Hicks and Gracie already wrote about this,
right,
years ago.
right.
And, but it goes back to that breathwork thing about being able to calm your heart rate. And I try my best to do one of Wim Hof's methods like right before my matches. I have to be careful because it does make you a little lightheaded. So I try not to get too into it, but I do try my best to have a calm heart rate before each match.
I would, instead of doing a Wim Hof style breathing, that 4-part breath, I know you've taken multiple classes with me. That's the one I would encourage you to do instead. Is practice that for 5-10 minutes before a match and just see the difference that makes, because I've been able to find out that, I can get my heart rate low, especially when I'm doing the long breath holds. I can drop my heart rate really low, but then I do the breathing and it amps back up again, versus if I'm doing the 4-part, I drop it down low. I may not be able to get it as low as I can with the long breath holds, but the low heart rate from the long breath holds, that's not a permanent sustained thing, versus if you are doing that slow 4-part breathing, you can drop your heart rate and keep it there.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll definitely try that next time. Yeah, okay. And I'm really interested in Wim Hof too. I listened to him like when he was first on with Joe Rogan like years and years ago, and I've since read his book. And it's funny, like when he first came out, it was like it was just like this weird austere thing, esoteric thing, right? Like what are you talking about, kind of thing. And but now it's like almost everyone knows about him, which is pretty common. Because it's funny how it's like you hear about something and you're like super excited about it, but no one else knows what you're talking about. And then he finally gains like notoriety, and it's like, have you heard about Wim Hof?
I still am amazed that I find people that train at some level, like that train at some level of athletic endeavor, and they have no idea who Wim Hof is. And I came across some people this week that are like pretty significant competitors in their arena, and they had no idea about breath, no idea about cold exposure or anything else.
Yeah, it is interesting, right?
And not to take anything away from Wim, because Wim is amazing, but I learned so much from Stig. And Stig, whenever he was wrapping up his world record career, decided to go break all these world records. And some of the world records he chose to break, not because he was competing with Wim, but just because those are the world records that he went after, were some of those under the ice swim records. And Wim is just an average guy, versus Stig looks like a 6'3", 6'4" Greek god, and he was an Olympic swimmer. So needless to say, he's going to be able to swim longer, go farther, go faster under the ice than Wim could. And the fact he's probably 6 inches taller than Wim. But anyway, he also, just the techniques and the discipline that he had developed as a result of that whole Olympic career is a good perspective on what works, what doesn't work, what's most efficient in most situations. And there's so many nuances to breath. And as we just talked about, like, the Wim Hof method will get you some benefit right before you go into a competition. But I would think that I would do Wim Hof like maybe 2 or 3 hours before the competition. Then right before the competition, I'd be doing that 4-part breathing. So super hyperoxygenation, great thing, but do it earlier in the day so your body's fully recovered from that, as opposed to trying to do some hyperoxygenation. Then you're right there in the ring with another human, seeing who can redline whose heart first and pin the other one to the ground.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so I kind of want to talk about silence too, because that one is one of the more subtle ones that not a lot of people pay attention to. But I did have an experience one time with Tori. We were out in Death Valley out in Las Vegas. Pretty sure, I did a competition. And then we went out to like a tiny little, it was like a little trailer house, like on someone's ranch, and just spent the weekend out there. And she was saying that she had an experience where like this older native woman kind of like came to her and said that we speak too much, that we need to spend less time talking, and that silence was key.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, I'd like to hear your thoughts on like silence.
So a lot of people associate PTSD and just various forms of trauma with people who are coming back from a combat theater. But so many people in our society have some level of trauma something that happened in their childhood, something that happened maybe even yesterday. Maybe they got in a car wreck and they still have this trauma. And I've noticed there's a direct correlation between your unhealed trauma and the level of silence you're able to tolerate. And if you have a
Mm.
significant amount of unhealed trauma, your toleration of silence is absolutely zero because there's so many things that you are not willing or not able to deal with. And so you keep the noise on. It's like you're in your truck, the radio's cranked up, you walk into your house, every electronic device that you have is suddenly on and there's noise coming from everywhere versus people who are somewhere along the path as far as healing and doing the work. The silence is much more tamped down and you walk into somebody's house and you hear absolutely nothing. And it's like, yeah, this person is either actively doing work right now or they've already moved through their significant traumas.
Dude, that is intense. Yeah, I've never heard that before, but that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense because, it reminds me of some friends I had that, yeah, they can't ever be quiet. They're
Right.
always saying something, and I know them, and I know that they have trauma, and
Right.
so it makes a lot of sense. And a lot of times too, it's like I definitely can feel it inside me boiling up sometimes, right? Like
Right.
when there's silence, it's like there's like almost, I guess you could describe it as anxiety or something, but there's like something inside you where it's like I got to do something. I
Right.
need something in my ears. I need to watch something,
Right.
and yeah, that's really interesting because I've definitely experienced that where it's like you know um, where I need a moment and whoever I'm with is not able to have that moment where they're just like, whether it's like being quiet for something or
Hmm.
listening to something. I mean, I think we all know somebody that can't listen to something for longer than a couple seconds, right?
Right.
Man, that's really powerful and interesting. It makes me want to work on it some more.
We had a man at the men's group on Thursday and he did pretty good for about the first half of the circle. In the second half of the circle, he was just unable to be still. He just kept fidgeting. And then finally, the cell phone wound up in his hand.
Dang.
And I didn't want to say anything because he's kind of new and this whole thing is brand new to him and he's trying to grow. But then by the end of it, he just couldn't do it anymore. Like the full on with the cell phone and everybody's totally focused on the man talking and what was being shared except for him. And it's like that's the majority of society. And it's like, how do we get people out of that? And I think the most powerful thing, just because breathing is a tool to keep you occupied, is just sitting doing the 4-part breath for 3 to 5 minutes every day. So at least you have something to do. So you're not sitting in absolute silence. You're sitting there counting your seconds of your inhale, your pause seconds, your exhale, and then your final pause when you're empty. And that's a good gateway to start getting you into some level of silence. And eventually just stop the counting and just sit there and breathe as slowly and deeply as you can, keeping your spine straight and seeing how long you can just sit there and be okay with doing absolutely nothing but breathing.
Yeah. Yeah. Man. And see, I wonder about this a lot or I've just been thinking about it a lot lately. Again, because I'm going to be a parent soon, and I wonder about like the battle between devices and having them learn to, what do you call it?
Self-regulate.
Yeah, self-regulate or entertain
Mm.
themselves, right? It's
Right.
like, obviously, it's like I think about all the boring car rides I had, and it's like, man, I
Yeah.
wish I would have had a Game Boy back then or whatever. And but that teaches you to use your imagination and to be able to just be okay with what's inside your brain and not constantly distract yourself. I mean, I guess, using your imagination as a form of distraction, but, imagination is important.
Right.
And so I wonder about how am I going to manage that balance, going forward. Because when I was little, I had video games, but and I definitely played them a lot. I definitely would spend a whole day playing video games with my brother, but I also spent a huge amount of time outside playing basketball and being outside with my friends. And so, yeah, what is that balance, and how do we do that? Because just recently, I've definitely been listening to some people talk about how ADHD is pretty much like, or one of the factors of ADHD is screen time.
Right.
And if you can manage the screen time, you'll start to notice that the symptoms of ADHD either go down or,
right.
Get better at least.
Right. And you could find some studies if you look for them. They're not heavily publicized, but direct correlation, not just between ADHD, but just between general happiness, depression, just the kids who had the devices from age 6 on up versus the kids that didn't get the devices till age 14. When you look at them when they're 16, just the marked difference between the way they are. And then you look at the tech executives, like the guys who developed this technology out in Silicon Valley, their kids aren't allowed to have this stuff. And that should be a telling sign right there. It's like, oh, you're making this food product, but you don't give it to your family?
Right.
Oh, well, maybe I shouldn't be eating it either.
Right. Yeah, the thing with the chips, and
yeah,
I think there was like something about like the Apple CEO or whatever doesn't let his kids have an iPhone.
Yeah,
but they want your kids to have iPhones.
Right.
Yeah. And man, the iPhones these days, dude, the color that comes from those things is absolutely insane.
Right.
Like just the difference between the 14 and the 15, it's like intense, like
right.
I'm like looking at it, I'm like, I can't even, it's like hard to look at. It's like, this thing is so beautiful to my eyes, and it's like, man, imagine having one when you're a kid and your brain's not even developed, and you're just so used to looking at that.
Right. And your brain wires based on that versus looking at trees, looking at nature.
Right. Yeah. And it's always funny what, nature is one of those things that you can't or I haven't been able to explain why it helps, but something about just like going out in nature helps. And I'll notice too that, I talk about not being connected to devices, but I literally have 3 devices recording this podcast right now.
Right.
And I manage Instagram. I manage I manage multiple YouTube. So I am the most connected person. I'm always on it.
Right.
And, but what I notice is when I try my best to do a camping trip when I can. And when I go out there, it's like I don't even feel the need to get on it. I'll just like put it down. And, some of it is that the connection is bad, but a lot of it is like I just feel like I don't need it. And it's funny. Sometimes I feel like there's a battle between like nature and technology, of who's controlling the humans. I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, nature definitely has like some profound effect that you honestly don't even feel it until like you actually like get out there,
Right.
But yeah, the silence thing, man, the silence thing is super powerful. And I feel like that's one of my best traits. Not that I'm silent. I definitely probably talk too much, but something that people have told me is that I'm able to have a conversation with people, like let them speak. And I feel like that's kind of what helps me keep this podcast going, is that I'm able to, what do you call it? Have space for someone else. And, yeah, I think it's always funny too when we meet somebody that doesn't have space. Like one of the number one things that bugs me is when someone asks me a question, and then as soon as I go to tell them my answer, they just interrupt me and tell me what they were thinking about it. Well, I don't know. It's like, yeah, what do you think about aliens? And I'm like, oh, well, I really think. And then they're like, yeah, so I think it's UFO. And I'm like, oh, well, okay, I guess tell me what you think about aliens. I was thinking about this. Have you seen the movie Shallow Hal?
I haven't seen the full movie, but I've seen enough of it to know what it's about. Yeah.
Right. One of the gurus is in it. I forget his name. I think he's the one that shot the one that says, I am not your guru, but he's like, talks about breath work and does the ice bath, like a big guy.
Tony Robbins.
He's in there. And he's talking to one of the dudes, and he's like blurting out. And he's like, yeah, you have a blurting problem. He's like, I can help you with that. And it like goes over his head. He doesn't know what he's talking about. But there's definitely something to that. I think it's like what you're saying, where it's like, yeah, they can't like have enough pause to just like let someone get out their thoughts, and they'll just like say what's on their mind as soon as it comes to their brain.
Right.
Yeah. So you think the 4-part breath helps with that?
I think 4-part breath helps with everything. I want to be cautious in how I state this, but I'm going to go ahead and just throw this out there. Most people that have some type of hypertension or blood pressure issues, that have some type of digestive issues and have some type of sleep issues, they may truly have significant underlying problems, but the simplest problem that all of them have that can be fixed rather quickly is they all have a breathing problem. I've yet to find somebody who has sleep issues, who has digestive issues, or has blood pressure issues who breathes slow and fully. All of them are very rapid, shallow breathers. And a healthy adult human should be breathing somewhere around 4 to 6 times a minute. While you go look at most humans and they're breathing between 12 and 20 times a minute. So 2 to 3x plus what they should be breathing. And you can only imagine what that would do to your metabolic function, your emotional state, your mental state if you're breathing like that.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And so let's transition out of this. Let's talk about because I think we talked about most of the modalities, right? We hit the breath work, movement is pretty obvious. I think movement is health. I think that's pretty obvious. I feel like ice bath's pretty common these days. Silence. Yeah, and then I'd like to talk to you about the men's group. Man, there was actually an article going around recently. It was making its way on Instagram and TikTok. It was just saying that a study shows that men need to hang out with other men up to 2 times a week, but that most men are getting it closer to like one time a month, if at all. And most people I know, it's like never. Most people don't even get to get any hangout sessions. And so one of my favorite things that we all do is you've led a men's group where we all come together and we do a little bit of movement, some breath work, and then we share stories and eat food. And it's been honestly super powerful for me. I really think that, something about having an opportunity to open up in front of other men is powerful. And I don't know why, but so like we get in a circle and then each person gets a moment to get like 5 or 10 minutes to say what's going on in their life. And something about that is super powerful. I don't know what it is, but just having a moment where other men are open to hearing what you have to say and kind of just like sharing what's going on, I always feel better after that. And so, and you lead the group and it's done amazing things for me. But yeah, I'd like to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, lots of things to say. So let me start off with the way we live right now is a very unnatural way and not consistent with the way humanity has grown and thrived historically. Like we were meant to be in these tribes of about 130 people. We weren't meant to be in these mega cities where we're disconnected. And then our closest friends are spread 20 to 30 to 50 miles apart. We were meant to be in these communities where everybody with, I'm not going to say like-minded values, but some type of common connection. We all lived together. And it's like you had all the women, they would take care of the children, they would raise the crops, the men would be responsible for the building, for the hunting, for the protection of the group, et cetera. And then suddenly we've come into societies where we've outsourced all of that, everything from the child care and the food production to even the protection. It's like, even 100 years ago, 150 years ago, it was common in most parts of the country where every able-bodied man could be deputized if there was a problem, or they were part of the volunteer fire department, and everybody was willing to engage and help out. And I would say, if there's anything, the storms, Helen, is that how you say Helene? Whatever the name of that storm that just ripped through North Carolina proved, it's like all these people we've outsourced this to, they aren't coming to help us. It's like we're helping each other. It's like there was 100 times more rescues, more aid being rendered by a bunch of civilian volunteers than any government organization in those areas. And so back to your simple question on just men coming together, I would say it's bigger than that. It's people coming together. It's not just you go live in your single family dwelling with your nuclear household and you maybe engage with friends once or twice a week and sometimes once or twice a month or less. And then it's a matter of what's the level of engagement you have with those people. In 2012, when I went through my divorce, I lost all these people that I thought were my friends. And I realized I don't know how deeply we really connected to each other because I knew what sport teams they followed. I knew what their favorite meals were. I know what their alcoholic beverage or music of choice was. But as far as what their greatest fears were, what their biggest dreams are, what they think their purpose for being here on this planet, I didn't know any of that.
Mhm.
While, like you said, this men's circle, it's like the second time in the men's circle, you could probably cite that out of every man there. Okay, this is this guy's biggest fears. This is his greatest dreams. This is why he thinks he's on this planet. And this is what he's trying to do versus outside of that men's circle setting, how many people have you known for years that you would be able to say that about?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'll share blood, sweat, and tears with somebody and still not really know much about them, you know?
Right. And that's something that's interesting because, yeah, I found that very unique as well whenever I was into martial arts. And yeah, it's like I would be traveling for my day job, working crazy 50, 60 hours a week, traveling around the country. Then I come into town and spend 4 hours at the gym on Saturday and then 4 hours again on Sunday and then back out on. So probably like outside of work, that was like my most, and well, outside of work and socializing with friends, that was probably my most focused activity. And I was with the same people, 8 hours on Saturday, 8 hours on Sunday. I could tell you ridiculously little about any of them. And one of the guys took his life, and it's like, I didn't even realize he was going through any kind of depression or any kind of issues. Like we've been training together for 8 years, and I didn't know he was going through a tough time,
Right.
especially a tough time where it was time for him to check out.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so back to the whole, I guess just looping that back in is men have the highest suicide rate, a much higher suicide rate than women. And it's a matter of they feel they have nobody they can connect with, nobody they can talk with. And I don't want to shit on therapy too much, but obviously, if therapy and the antipsychotic, antidepressant drugs worked, you wouldn't have 22 veteran suicides a day.
Right.
And so it's a matter of there needs to be something else. And I think that something else is you need a tribe of people because you could have a bestie and you and him could be solid, but then you need more than just one person. Just like, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm into polygamy or anything, but even your partner, Tori's amazing, but you clearly need healthy female relationships. You don't need to be physically intimate with anybody other than Tori, but you definitely need a breadth of relationships. And the men's circle, the value of that is there's a level of vulnerability that men can have with other men that they can't have with women. And even if they have that with women, they don't get the level of, I don't want to say affirmation, but the level of response that's meaningful because at the end of the day, men and women are wired differently. We think differently, we feel differently, we behave differently. And you can have great, deep, meaningful connections with women, but you also need those with men.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I definitely think like it helps too when it's just a men's group, you know, because I find that, you know, because not everyone has done the work, right? Not everyone is secure in where they're at. And a lot of times what happens is when you bring, you know, a girl into the group, like people just start acting different.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's one of the things I like about the men's group is that, yeah, there's no ego, right? Because that's the first thing that comes out. And, you know, I'm very fortunate enough to I'm secure in my relationships. I don't have to really, I don't really worry about it or think about it. Like, I don't feel the need to impress or act some type of way because a girl was around. But I've definitely been around others, and then a girl comes around, and all of a sudden they're like acting different. I'm like, dude, what are we doing here, bro? Like, don't do that. Don't, right? And yeah, it becomes this thing where it's like, yeah, I've come to understand it because it's like, there, if you don't have that, that becomes the biggest thing in your mind.
Right.
So it's like, you can't judge someone for that. It's like they're missing something and they're looking for it, and it just happens to be there. So of course, they want to make an impression. But yeah, it's nice to be around a bunch of other guys, and no one is trying to come off a certain way because they want to look some type of way. It's like everyone is just chill. It's like we're all guys here, so I really appreciate that. But yeah, one of my buddies, he was telling me that he's new to the city, and he's a friend, but I met him because I'm his personal trainer.
Okay.
But we've become really good friends. Like, we're the same age. I really care about his progress. I want to see him lose weight. And we've grown to like each other. But he was telling me he's actually out of the country right now. But when he comes back, I want to bring him to a men's group. But he was just telling me, he's like, yeah, I've been smoking a lot more lately because I don't have any friends. He was like, when I'm hanging with my friends, I don't smoke as much. We'll smoke like one time, and then we'll be hanging out, and then maybe we smoke one more time at the end of it. He's like, but when I'm in my house and it's just me, he's like, dude, every 30 minutes I'm smoking. Right. And man, it just like struck me. I was like, oh, dude. I was like, I got to get you in this men's group, dude. We got to get you some fucking friends around here. Yeah, right. But that is so true. It's like, yeah, when you're left to your own devices, you don't. Yeah, it's like. I've definitely experienced the same thing, like when you're around other people, like whatever vice that you have, like it's just not at the forefront of your mind.
Right.
And so, yeah, I really think that, yeah, getting together with other people, helps, like in ways that you probably don't even understand. And so, yeah, the men's group has been really big for me. I wasn't able to make it this last one. I think it was last night. You guys had one?
Thursday.
Yeah, Thursday. That's right, it's Saturday now. Yeah, the thing about the Thursdays, because that's when I teach, and man,
well, the next one will be on Wednesday, which you'll probably teach on Wednesday though too.
Yeah, but it's not so bad to miss it every now and then. But it's just like I just don't want it to become a regular thing because, people come to train at my gym for me, so it's like,
I get it.
As much as this, I was like, oh, my assistant will cover it. Like, it's just not the same. Yeah, like it's like the one, it's like if he teaches on a random day, it's like that day no one wants to come, wow. and it's not anything on him. It's just people have gotten used to the relationship that I built with him. So it's like,
and I think that's the key right there. It's like the relationships, and it's a matter of having community and having relationships with multiple people in the community and multifaceted relationships, and not just, these are my gym buddies and this is all I know, or these are my whatever. And that's one of the things I like about the men's group is we have just such a diverse group of people. I don't think we have two guys in that group that do the same thing.
Right. Yeah. A lot of cool people that do a lot of different cool things. Another thing too is like when you hear other people's struggles, I think two things happens. It's like, one, you'll realize like how much we're all alike. Like, you go around the story and it's like, you'll be like, oh, I've been in that situation before. Or like, one of the guys I really like, Cam, like when he tells stories, sometimes I can imagine that I'll be there one day, and it's like, some people he's like, oh, I can see I'll run into that one of these days. And then some people are like, oh, I've been there before. And so you realize like we're all on a similar journey. We're just in different parts and in different ways, but it's all the same. And then another thing that you realize too is like, no matter what you got going on, someone in the group, and not in a bad way, but you'll hear like the problems or what they're dealing with, and you'll be like, man, I don't want anyone else's problems but my own. It's like you feel grateful for your problems. And I feel like that's important because a lot of times people get caught up in a victim mindset of like, oh, woe is me, everything bad happens to me. And to me, that's like, I don't want to be rude to say it's a weak mindset, but it's like, I have a hard time sympathizing with that mindset because I've heard people going through some absolutely banana stuff, and I'm just like, man, I would not want to experience that. I'm glad you're experiencing it and telling me about it, so now I know. Like one of our buddies, I think James is his name, but he compression boot caught on fire and he burnt his leg. I was like, dude, and yeah, it's just like, again, like you hear things that people are going through, and you're just like, I'm not so upset I lost a match the other day.
Right. Yeah, James, we were talking about that last Thursday, and I was like, so you fully recovered from the compression boot? It's like, yeah, but I'm trying to do something about the scar. It's like, James, chicks love scars. Don't worry about the scar. as long as you're moving around and everything works, don't worry about it.
Right. A compression boot, just to make sure I know it, it's like those pants that you wear, right? And they fill up with air. Is that something different?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, okay, because I didn't know what exactly.
And I
what it was.
wouldn't call it a pant. It's more like just something that goes over your legs. And they have different kinds. Some that's cover lower legs. The ones he was in were like from his toes all the way up to the top of his thigh.
Right. Okay.
And then they fill up with air and they squeeze and they relax and squeeze and relax.
And his just blew up or something.
I don't even know what it was, because at the time he just thought it just burned him. He didn't realize how bad of a burn it was. And then as time went on, it got worse and worse. And then like more and more skin just kept coming off. He didn't think it was that bad at first. And then he wound up in the burn center in Galveston for like 3 or 4 days.
Damn. Yeah. And so around that same time, I had lost my championship match, and I was like kind of sad about it. But then hearing his story, I was like, there's nothing to be sad about.
I'd rather be the lose championship match than spend 3 days in if I spend 3 days in Galveston, I spend that kind of money. I want to be like in a luxury retreat or something where I'm having some good food and having a good time. I don't want to be laid up in a hospital bed.
Right. But yeah, just back to that thing about how powerful it is to share your own story and then hear other people's stories.
Yeah.
And I always like, I've done it a couple times. I realize I need more practice at it, but I've been asking people what their spirit animals are, because I really enjoy that part of it. The last one, we didn't do spirit animals, and I was bummed. I was like, dang it. I was trying to think about mine. It's funny asking martial artists about spirit animals, because they'll kind of be like, what are you asking me? Like, I asked this one guy, he's Australian, super talented guy. He just went to ADCC, and but I asked him what a spirit animal was, and I just could tell I caught him off guard. He didn't know what to say, and he ended up picking a sea otter, which is pretty cool. But
that's cool.
I realized like a part of being a host too is trying to help people get comfortable with, like, one, in the setting, and then two, like, understanding your intentions. Like, I could tell that maybe he kind of maybe thought that I was like, he was maybe worried about it being a trick question or something. Right. And it's like, cause I could, without any context, it doesn't really make sense. Right. Especially if you've never thought about it. But, so I'm like learning to, like, let people know that it's just a question, just kind of like to get some like interesting answers, but it's been funny, like seeing some of the reactions I've got asking people what their spirit animal is. Right. I had one dude pick a human. He's like, he has a degree. He's really good at jiu-jitsu, and he has a degree in biology. And so he was like, you're not going to like my answer, but I'll pick a human. Have you always been in a leadership position?
I have almost always been in a leadership position, because when I was in a leadership position, it was not good. And let me tell you a quick story. When I first started working, I'm trying to think of the right way to frame this. I was realizing there was a lot of inefficiencies and a lot of very poor quality planning decisions made. And by 22, and I already probably decided before that I wanted to be a leader, that I had 2 options. Either I'm going to be subjected to somebody else's poor leadership decisions, or I'm going to be the one subjecting everybody else to my poor leadership decisions. And then obviously the goal is to minimize the number of poor leadership decisions. So my goal was to get as high up on the food chain as rapidly as I could. But then I reached a point probably in my late 20s where I realized, okay, I'm kind of here, and this is kind of the level I like operating on, because above me is like pure politics and administration, and I don't consider that to be my strength, because I like to be honest. I like to tell people things, and a lot of times people don't like to hear the truth. They can't handle the truth. And so it's better just to be at the level where I'm at the senior level that builds things and leads the people and plans how we're going to complete projects. And I
Gotcha.
feel that's a level I'm comfortable with, as opposed to the level above me that's responsible for the sales and the client management and everything. And that's a super important level. And most businesses couldn't function without that level. But I'm not the guy to make the sale and then cultivate the client relationships after the sale. I'm the one to come in there, understand what they need, build it for them, make sure they're happy with what we created, and then move on to the next one.
Gotcha. Yeah. So we'll do some advice questions. What would be your piece of advice for someone looking to level up their leadership skills? Like maybe they have a leadership position, or maybe they're looking to be in a leadership position. What would be your piece of advice for a young leader or a new leader?
Well, the most powerful thing you can do is talk to the people who work for you, because they're going to be able to tell you exactly everything they think needs to be improved. And this whole 360-degree leadership perspective, I know it's come into vogue in the last decade, but when I started off, it's like, yeah, you got guidance from the people above you. You rarely got any kind of meaningful feedback from people below you, and that is just so essential, because you have this perspective on where you are, what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong. But the people who have to be subjected to the implications of your decisions every single day, talk to them, see what they think, how they think things are going. And if you're higher up in the chain, if you have multiple levels below you, then it's good to get down to as many levels below you as you possibly can, because that guy at the bottom who's doing the most menial grunt task may have a totally different perspective than that team leader who is somewhere in the middle, versus that manager that you're talking to every day. And it's a matter of making sure you go up and down the chain as much as you can. You get everybody's perspective that's dealing with you, that's directly impacted by the quality of your decisions, and make sure you understand what they think you're doing right, what they think you're doing wrong. And if they have something they absolutely hate, don't interrupt. Just let them talk as long as they want to talk. Back to your point on being silent. Somebody asks you about aliens, make sure, or if you ask somebody about aliens, let me turn it around. If you ask somebody about aliens, make sure they're done talking before you give your opinion on aliens.
Right. Man, that's super powerful. I hear a lot about when I was in the Marine Corps, so that's like classic, up and down leadership. Tori works at a restaurant. I'm constantly hearing stories from her. And yeah, they all lack that.
Right.
No one pretty much always just comes from the top down, right?
Right.
And that can be one of the most frustrating things if you're on the lower end, because a lot of times the people at the top, they get removed from what's actually happening.
Right.
Like there was this one classic moment at a restaurant I was working at. Of course, there's like a bunch of different ways we got to do things, right? Mm-hmm. And like how to make a table.
Right.
And the owner comes in and he's trying to be like, spunky that day. And he's like, I'm going to help y'all through this rush. No joke. Within like 30 minutes of helping us, he was like, why are we doing it this way? And I'm like, well, this is the rules, guy. And he's like, well, we're not doing this anymore. We're changing it. I'm like, oh, he gets a little taste of it. Now we want to change the rules. It's like so funny. Like you had to get, the table needs 2 linen cloths and they got to be facing a certain way. And it's got to be made up a certain way. Literally 30 minutes of helping us do this. And he's like, this doesn't make any sense. And we're like, yeah, you think? Like, we don't have enough black, we don't have enough linen cloths for both of these ever. But it's only when he actually comes in and gets a taste of it does any of that happen.
Right.
And I remember another classic moment too. The COO comes in and, I guess his whole mission is to make all the restaurants the same and, or make sure that they're in alignment with whatever plans that he has. Mm-hmm. And one of the things he's being anal about is we have like these lights They're only in this one spot, and they're supposed to be lined up with these tables.
Right.
Well, we moved the tables closer to the line because the gap between where the food was coming out and the table was big enough that customers would want to walk through there to go to the bathroom.
Right.
And but where the food comes out is tile. And so you get ladies that come on with their high heels, and there's food, so it's always wet.
Yeah.
And so we make the manager made the decision, the general manager, by the way, makes the decision to move the tables closer so that way there's less room so that more traffic would just be naturally go around the tables.
Right.
Well, the COO comes in and he's like, well, we designed this place for this, blah, 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 blah. The general manager tries to tell him why we did it, and he don't care. Move him back. Not 2 days later, a lady slips and falls. And it's just like, it cracks me up because it's like just that classic moment of, someone from higher comes down and like, we're supposed to be like this. And you're like trying to tell them. Right. It's like, well, dude, we're here every day. We're trying to tell you why we do these things. But yeah, I really like what you said.
And I think that's the most important thing of being a leader is, you can't lose sight of what the people underneath you are doing. And if you're so detached from that, the restaurant's a classic example. Like, when was the last time the CEO of a company, I know they have this show, Undercover CEO, and I haven't never watched it, so I don't know, but it's like, but how many times does CEO of these large restaurant chains actually show up and wash some dishes, bust some tables, or just act as a server for an evening, and what would they change as a result of their experience doing that?
Yeah.
There's a big difference between showing up and managing a restaurant for a night versus you're actually in the kitchen, making sure you don't run out of clean dishes and clean silverware, making sure everybody's happy with their experience, or making sure you're turning these tables as quickly as you can. You don't have a lineup because you don't have enough bussers, or you don't have enough people to get the tables cleaned up and turned around.
Right. Yeah. 100%. I could go on about leadership for forever, so I'll try to switch it because I'll just start ranting. But so we talked a lot about like trauma and processing trauma. What would be your piece of advice for someone who either, because I would say, I wanted to ask you what you thought spirituality was. I would completely miss that question. Let's do it. So yeah, what is spirituality to you? What do you think it means?
I think spirituality is connection to everything. And I could talk about this for hours, so I'm going to try to come up with a very concise answer. Is if you're connected to everything, that means you don't hate anything. And so if there's something you absolutely hate, then that's something you ought to examine, because that's probably something that's keeping you from as deep a spiritual connection as you can possibly have. And again, because I'm a technology guy, and earlier in my life, I was a martial artist, and I do consider all the things that I do a very powerful form of functional medicine. And if I don't see benefit, then I don't do it, or I change it and shift it to where I do see benefit. So looping this back to spirituality, because I like the Trinity, I would say most people's lives fit into 3 categories. You have your relationships, you have your financial life, and then you have your health. And underneath health, you have your physical, your emotional, and your mental health. And how are all those things? There may be some people, their spiritual health or their mental health or their emotional health may be great, but their physical health is garbage. And I would say that's going to be a limitation, because if your physical health is suffering, you're only going to get so far in that mental emotional state before you're stuck or held back because your physical health isn't where it needs to be. And then you move to relationships, where almost everybody wants a primary romantic partner. You have relationships with friends, you have relationships with family. And if your relationship with family is absolutely garbage because your siblings hate each other, and you don't get along with your parents, or you're in a horrible marriage, or you just have no close friends, even if one of those is firing well, if you have another one that's not so well, the other ones are going to start to suffer. So it's a matter of getting them all in balance. And the last is your finance, like your business or your job, however your primary income stream is. And then you got to have investments, or you're going to be poor your whole life, and you got to get that going on. And then you have to have some level of philanthropy or give back. And that certainly looks different if you're Elon Musk, worth almost $1 trillion, versus a young guy with a young family starting out. But there needs to be aspects of this in all of it, or you're going to get down the road and it's not going to be working for you. And it's, oh, I just focused on my business and, or my job, and I didn't build any investments, and I was doing nothing to grow philanthropy, to encourage the kind of behavior that I wanted to see in the world. And so back to the question on spirituality, being spiritual is being connected to the whole of the universe and understanding and accepting things for what they are, and also understanding the direction that you want to change things. You don't try to change things out of hate or fear. You try to change things as, this is the vision that I love and that I want for myself and everybody I care about in the world. And again, once you reach a certain level, then you realize, okay, I'm interconnected to everybody. And even though I may disagree with this person's politics, or I may disagree with the fact that this person wants to actively commit acts of violence and cause suffering on other people, hating on that person is not going to take me to a deeper level of spirituality. It's not going to make me a better person. It's certainly not going to bring any happiness or joy into my life. And at the end of the day, that's what this whole thing is about. It's about how much happiness and joy can you bring into your own life, and how much happiness and joy can you bring in the lives of everybody around you. And if you want to go into the simple explanation with spirituality, that's the way I describe it. It's no different from that whole love your neighbors yourself. And then every single religion on the planet has some derivation of that, where bring happiness and joy into your own life and bring happiness and joy into as many other people's lives as you possibly can.
Yeah, man, that's a great answer, dude. You killed it. Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, I like the way you broke it down. I can definitely tell you put some thought into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I'll definitely, you brought up the family thing, and I'm going through something with my family right now. My brother, and my buddy asked me, he's like, yeah, he asked me, he goes, why are you upset? Because he didn't, like, I would say that, like, my brother doesn't actively bring, like, anything to the table necessarily, like, if you want to put it like that, but it's still, just like you said, it's an important part of our spiritual existence. It's like, I kind of, maybe it wasn't at the forefront of my mind, but I would always think, like, when I hear other people's stories about their, they don't ever talk to their brothers or whatever, I kind of like felt a little bit of pride that, like, oh yeah, me and my brother play Call of Duty together and hang out and talk, but literally one thing led to the next the other day, and I told him to F off, and I'm like, and what makes me, it's so funny how the universe challenges you, but like, I already know that, like, my brother's not in a space to apologize or to make amends. So I'm going to have to be, as always, the bigger brother and make amends.
Right.
And that's like, it it doesn't feel gratifying, like, in the moment, right? Because I'm going to have to, whatever I think was right or wrong, it doesn't matter. I'm going to have to suck it up and be the bigger man and be like, I'm sorry, dude, or whatever. Even though I might think he owes me an apology, whatever. Right. So it's just funny how, like, yeah, everything, like, I haven't had to worry about arguing with my brother for I don't know how long. And then now it's like circled back where, like, something out of nowhere has just caused us to be, like, angry at each other.
Right.
So yeah, super funny. But yeah, back to your point, it's like, it shouldn't affect me because he really doesn't have, like, that much part of my life, but it does. Yeah. It does. It's like in my mind where I'm, like, thinking about it.
Absolutely.
So that's very interesting. I'm definitely going to take another look at that. But, so last advice question, what piece of advice would you give someone who is either dealing with trauma or looking to get a deeper spiritual connection? Because I think the two are related, right? Like,
absolutely, they are.
Yeah. So what would you think? Yeah, what would be your advice to someone?
So back to the 4-part breath work again. This sounds like the single tool in my tool belt, and it's really not, because I can go hours about fasting, about the value of just having your feet on the ground in nature, about going and hugging a tree, taking some deep breaths, swimming in some lakes that don't have a bunch of chemicals in them. But the breath is the key, and regardless of where you are, you may be in apartments, you may not be able to put your feet on the ground, there may not be unpolluted air, there may not be a natural body of water you can swim in. But everybody can always do the breathing, and everybody can always take deep, slow, full breaths, no matter where you are. So that's the first thing, is start doing that on a regular basis. The second thing is find a circle of men who are committed to the same things you are and be around them. And I know we mentioned just a minute ago, we are such a diverse group. We've got one guy that does real estate. I'm the guy that does big, large software projects. We have another tech guy, but the other tech guy, he basically does encrypted phones and encrypted laptops. So even though we're both tech, totally opposite ends of the tech space, we have two guys who do audio visual production. But again, one guy's more a producer and one guy's more of like a expert master cameraman. And just like the list goes on, like one guy's an amazing real estate guy. And it's like there's not two guys in the group that do the exact same thing, but the one common thread is every single one of them is into personal growth and wants to be in a better place for themselves, their family, the world in a year than where they are right now. And so find those people, and those people are everywhere. They aren't just in one place. And I know we mentioned the hurricane relief efforts that are going on in North Carolina and Florida. I mean, there's all kinds of things. Even if you say like, oh, there's nobody in my area, I bet if you plug in with a group like that that's trying to help other people, you're going to find somebody in that group that has got some commonality with you, that's on a similar trajectory as you. So find things. If you can't find them organically, start volunteering your time for something you care about, and you will find people. If you're working for a cause you're deeply committed to, you will find somebody else who's deeply committed to that same cause, and there will be a common thread then with that individual. So first is the breathing. The second is start finding your community and tribe. And the third thing is find the things that are going to deeply cultivate your next level of growth. Like whatever that is, if you are into these spiritual retreats and you want to go out in the woods and sit in a sweat lodge and fast for a couple of days and that's your thing, go find the people that do that. If you want to go do some kind of amazing physical activity like some type of ultra marathon or something, because your connection with nature, God, the universe is going to help you ascend, and go do that. But find the thing that's going to help you grow. And I know it may seem fun, but I've yet to find anybody who experiences spiritual growth by sitting in a casino or a bar. But maybe there are people like that. Maybe that is. So I don't think those vacations or those trips are necessarily going to move you to the next level, but find those experiences that will move you to the next level. So the breathing and the silence, the community, and actively seek out those experiences are going to get you to the next level.
Man, yeah, dude. Killing it. Man, I really appreciate that. Yeah. You know, one thing that we didn't talk about was the fasting. You said you're on a 70-hour fast.
Yeah.
That's nuts, dude. Yeah, that's nuts. But it was making me think about, I was listening to, it was a podcast where they're talking about like the Mayans and the Incas and all that. And he was just saying that in Mesoamerica, which is like the lower part of Mexico, but above South America, they didn't have any psychedelic plants really, because it's like more of a swamp. Right. So obviously in South America they do. And there's some in Mexico, but in that swampy area, they didn't have access to any psychedelic plants. So he was saying that the major way that these shamans would experience the flow state or the next level was the more readily available ones, which you could argue is like the most difficult ones, which is what they would do is they would fast, they would go without sleep, and then they would even cut themselves. Right. Obviously, we shouldn't be doing that, but it's essentially a way of going through, some type of immense pain. Right. And there's ways for us to experience that here, whether it's like cold therapy or, man, I know this one guy I did a podcast with. He's a good friend, does jujitsu. He stands on like a bed of nails, which I did with socks on. I couldn't even put my weight on it, and he could do it for 10 minutes straight barefoot. Right. Which was just mind blowing to me. But it's the same thing of getting past what you think is pain. But yeah, that's how these shamans had to reach that next level, which is no food, no sleep. Right. And that's, cause like psychedelics you can see as like almost, kind of like cheating almost, cause it's like a shortcut to the state. Right. But, fasting is super impressive, dude. Right. And I want to speak about psychedelic states for a minute, then I can go back to fasting. So speaking on psychedelic states, so Robert Bustani
So he and I have known each other for a long time. And before we became good friends, I went to his class and I was one of his students. And I remember a talk he gave on psychedelics. It was probably around 2015, so about 9 years ago. He was talking about psychedelics get people to a state that they may not be ready for. Because if you're using fasting, you're using breath work, those are my two modalities that I prefer. I prefer not to use sleep deprivation for various reasons. But that's a lot longer of a talk. And certainly pain's a way to do it, but don't do pain that's going to cause injury or permanent injury. But like the nails, the ice and stuff, that's okay. But the point is, there's this, he referred to it as a veil over the third eye. And I like that. It's like if you start using these techniques like fasting, breath work, pain, you start pulling that veil open and you become more aware of things, versus if you do it too suddenly, like with extreme psychedelics, you tear that veil open and you are exposed to things that you're not ready for. It's like being airlifted to the top of Everest and you didn't go spend any time at base camp, you didn't trek up the mountain, and suddenly you're at the summit and you got to acclimate instantly, versus you're acclimating as you're going up. And that's the metaphor that I like the best. It's like, okay, you're gonna take the psychedelic, you're gonna be airlifted to the top of the mountain. Then what's gonna happen when you get there? What are you gonna be ready for? And then what are you gonna really come back down the mountain with, versus you're going to spend some time at base camp, you're going to hike up the mountain, and you're going to be acclimating as you're going. So by the time you reach it, it's not as a traumatic experience, and you're probably able to appreciate the experience a lot more because you've acclimated as you're coming up, versus you were just airdropped and you're barely able to breathe right now.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Man, one time I experienced a state, and all the time I'll always be like, man, I hope I learned something really important or like some secret of the universe. And one time I was given one of those secrets, and I realized why we don't get them. It's because even if you get them, you're most likely not in a position to even use them. In this particular state, I saw Shiva, and he simply said, the only thing that matters in this life is being present. Mm-hmm. And I remember, like, as he said it, I tried to come up with words to explain the experience. I could tell my buddy when I came back, and he just goes, "See, you're not even present right now." And and as I was trying to formulate words to describe the experience, like because at first I was going towards the experience. As soon as I tried to come up with words, it started pulling me away. And he just goes, "See, you're not even present right now." And so coming back from that, it's like, it's so hard to be present. Like, we're always distracting ourselves. And, that I really do feel like that's a secret of the universe, is to be present. And I still don't even use it. I think about it, but I definitely don't take it as serious as I could have. Like, I really did get possibly like a gem, and I'm just kind of like, oh, that's nice. I'll just put it somewhere, Right. So I realized why we don't get them is because it's like, even if I told you a secret, it's kind of very similar to cliches. It's like, someone wants to learn how to lose weight. The answer is a cliche. Well, they're not even going to listen to you. They want they imagine it to be some super complicated answer. Like, oh, I got to do this type of fasting and eat this type of food and do this. Like, really just eat fruits and vegetables and exercise.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Like something super simple, but we don't want the super simple answers. We want some complicated thing.
Right.
But yeah, I really like what you said. Yeah. Well, we essentially have to, be in a position to use the states, or to take advantage of them, or to appreciate them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And back to fasting, Mindy Peltz is an MD that written a great book called Fast Like a Girl. I would say every woman who's interested in fasting, or any woman who's not in optimal physical, emotional, mental health, should read the book and implement some of the practices. A lot of great stuff from men in there too. Anyway, one of my favorite quotes from her is, "We have a whole pharmaceutical industry built around mimicking the benefits of fasting," where if you were just to fast, most of the benefits you'd get from a lot of the drugs. Your body is an amazing self-healing machine. The problem is almost all of our food is garbage. And so the easiest way to clean your system out of all that garbage and all those toxins is to stop putting stuff in for a period of time. And people have this perspective, oh, I have to eat to have energy. I'm trying not to go off too much of a tangent. I was dating this beautiful Romanian lady in 2003, and she's Eastern Orthodox, and fasting was a big part of their regimen during Lent. And so I was going to fast with her. And by I was going to fast with her, I was going to stay home and not travel for a couple weeks. And I was going to train as hard as I possibly could every single day after work. And I was going to use that as my out for fasting. And as a martial artist, you can appreciate this better than most people when I tell you this. There were guys that I was evenly matched with. By day 3 on the fast, I was doing a juice fast, or the master cleanse, if you're familiar with this. By day 3, I was half a step faster with guys that I was pretty evenly matched with. And by day 5, I was a full step faster than guys that I was evenly matched with before the fast. And it's like my whole intent of training this intently during the fast was that was going to be my out. It's like, I'm not gonna freaking do juice for 14 days. That's insane. I'm gonna train really hard in about 3 or 4 days. I'm gonna tell Christina, I love you and everything, but this fast isn't working out for me. I can't train the way I want to. And then whenever 3 days hits and I'm half a step faster than these guys, like, okay, maybe there's something to it. And then when 5 days hits, like, okay, I'm doing this is now part of my life from now until the time I leave the planet, because this is really powerful stuff. And you go look at like the original Olympics, where most of those Greek athletes, they were fasted for 1, 2, sometimes 3 days before their events. And they've shown all these things where your senses become a lot more acute, your reflexes become much more acute. And what the hypothesis is for why this happens in men is because you had to find something to eat because you were going to starve. So of course your senses are going to become a lot more acute. Your reflexes are going to heighten because you're about to have to kill something so you and the rest of the tribe can eat. And so it's just a natural adaptation. I don't know if that's really the reason why the adaptation happens. They've done multiple studies where 1 to 3 days fasted guys are a lot sharper mentally. Their senses are heightened and their reflexes are a lot better. So if you ever do it, I definitely would like your report back on just how you did at the gym after a day or 2 of fasting.
Man, I'll have to try it one of these days. I definitely noticed that, like, it doesn't matter how soon, like, if I eat anytime after like 1 or 2, it's like performance goes way down. Even though, they'll tell you is like, oh, all you need is like an hour for your food to digest.
Yeah.
That's not true. Yeah. That's not true. I've had 3 or 4 hours for food to digest, and it still takes my performance down significantly. So, right. Yeah, no, I definitely agree with what you're saying. And you hear a lot, the competitors will talk about like a lion doesn't go into a fight hungry, or doesn't go into a fight full. It's
right.
They're always fasted.
Right. And I know we talked about that on the walk over that Ultimate Fighter reality show from like the early 2000s and stuff. All those guys, they ate once a day. They ate, they went to sleep, and they got up and trained hard, did their challenge, and then didn't eat till the next day. And I've been on that cycle since January of 17, and that's been a huge life changer. The first couple weeks were a little bit of a shift as your body just goes from burning sugar, because if we're eating 3 meals a day, we have all this free floating sugar in our bloodstream. We have all this stored up in our liver, but then you get up, you exercise, and depending on your metabolism, how hard you exercise, etc., but within 12 to 16 hours of eating, you burn through everything, and you're pretty much in a state of ketosis where basically you're consuming your body's fat for fuel, and you don't have any more sugar, and just making that switch over from a sugar only diet to being physiologically adaptive to where your body can burn sugar or burn fat equally efficient is a huge game changer in terms of physical, mental, emotional health as well. Because all these people are like, oh, I get hangry, I can't do that. And it's like, no, it's like you have a physiological dysfunction. And the only way to get over that is you have to do the fasting. You have to push through that. Just like, oh, it's hard to lift weights. I'm not gonna go to the gym. It's hard to lift weights. And so you're not gonna get any stronger because you're not going to the gym. It's like the same thing. No, I get hangry if I miss a meal. I can't do that. It's like, well, the only way your body's gonna become physiologically adaptive to burning both things, sugar and fat, is you have to do it. You have to train your body like, okay, we're going to sit here and we're not going to eat for a day and you're going to start burning fat.
Yeah.
And the average person, I haven't tried this, but I'm told the average person can live for 30 or 40 days with no issues with food. I mean, you have the Jesus story of 40 days in the wilderness. I think the world record is something like 400 and something days for a Scottish guy that didn't eat. And that's if you don't count all these yogis in India who supposedly haven't eaten for years. And they had one guy in India, I think it was 2011, 2012. You can still find the articles on Sky News or the video clips where they had him under observation by the Indian military for 30 days. 30 days. They never saw him eat. They never saw him drink. They never saw him go to the bathroom.
Damn. That's crazy.
Yeah. And supposedly he's not the only one. There's a lot of guys out there that do that. And so again, it's the whole mindset we have of like how much we need to eat, when we need to eat. And it's like, I've been eating 5, maybe 6 meals a week since January of 2017, versus a lot of people eat 5 to 6 meals a day. And it's like, yeah, just the shift that happens mentally, emotionally, physiologically is just amazing. And I'm not saying it's impossible to be unhealthy when you're fasting on a regular basis, but it becomes a lot more difficult because your body starts repairing itself. You have that opportunity to rest and repair, which you never get. Because like you said, it takes more than an hour or 2 or 3 to digest food. It's like 4, 5, 6 hours before your body returns to any kind of state of stasis. And that depends on what you're eating. If you're eating a big steak and you're drinking a bottle of wine and a chocolate cake, it may take 12 to 16 hours before your body's back to a state of stasis.
100%. Yeah, I've definitely had states where I realize I eat too much. And one of the things that so I've experienced this one in the Marine Corps. I remember doing the final event and they gave us, I think it was 3 MREs the last 3 days. And I was like so scared of like not having enough food that I made like 1.5 last for 3 days. Like I had a whole bunch of extra food at the end of it. And I was like, and I felt fine. I didn't really feel like I needed anything. And I remember there were some guys that like ate through all their stuff. And I've definitely like had moments where I'm like, whether it's like a psychedelic trip or whatever, but you'll be like, I think the biggest thing, and it's funny, is like when I first read this book, I didn't even read it. I kind of like skimmed it. Yeah, it was called Conscious Eating. Mm-hmm. And I was like looking for a way to like eat better and lose weight. And I just remember being like, this obviously isn't the answer. But just where I'm at now, I realize like, man, we all overeat because we distract ourselves while we eat.
Right.
If you pay attention to your food and chew it and think about it, you're full way faster. Way faster. Like you won't even finish your plate.
Right.
But if I'm watching TV, man, I'm going to finish my whole plate, probably eat a little more, and then eat a cookie. You know what I'm saying? It's like, so yeah, just like how much consciousness changes, both when you're paying attention to the food and then when you go without it.
Right.
Like how much we abuse it. And like you said, use it to like get over like our physiological states. Like as soon as you feel some type of agitation, people would just like eat something. So yeah, man, dude, we've covered so many awesome topics. This has been an awesome podcast, man. We covered fasting, breath work, cold therapy, movement, spirituality. I really appreciate you taking the time, Mike. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you guys for tuning in.